What's up, guys? Want another episode? So, Death Battle recently gave us a cipher revealing every match for the season 10. Personally, I'm hyped as hell for this. I think it was a really interesting choice. And actually, I'm really excited for the season in general with the way they're approaching it. Instead of having this mid-season finale like we have recently, they've made it a full wheel and just said you're going to get all 16 of these matches one after another. I think that's really interesting. I think they've laid the groundwork for some really interesting fights this season, and I want to break down each part of the cipher, say what I think, and what matches I think happen. I've tried to leave multiple fights on each wheel because there's always the chance there's going to be some curveball-y. But first of all, I want to start off with the 4 fights they've confirmed for the season, and which parts of the cipher I think they'll be. I'm also gonna save the one which I think will be the finale till the end because I want to talk about it in more detail. Alright, starting off, let's talk about the 4 which have already been revealed and where I think they fit on the cipher. Alright, here they are, and first of all, we'll talk about Ant-Man vs. Adam because it's probably the one I care the least about. I mean, on paper, it sounds like an interesting match, Marvel vs. DC is always something which I think is gonna be alright. And like both are okay characters. I think it's a somewhat interesting debate from what I've heard, but I just neither character are interesting. And honestly, I pray it's gonna be a 6 out of 10. So when I make my video, I can say it didn't make a big impact on me. Okay, I don't care if that's a lame joke. I want to make it. Let me make the joke. It's obviously the gonna be the Adams part of the wheel because like it's an atom. It is literally the symbol on Atom's head. So it's one of the most obvious here. The other match I just don't really care about that's been revealed is Cole McGrath versus Alex Mercer. But I am actually happy this one got made. With Ant-Man vs. Adam, I always kind of thought it'll be made eventually, but I won't really care. But I did want Cole McGrath versus Alex Mercer, because even though I don't know either character and I don't really care, I know it's a fight which a lot of people online love, to the point where when I saw it on the 3D part of the poll, I knew it was going to win. Because it's one of those rare fights which builds this community around it. Which, there's another fight which got confirmed for that. We'll talk about that one in a second, but first, uh, the Dragonborn versus the Chosen, people are allowed to talk about it at this point. Uh, it got revealed a few months back, I think, and everyone's been pretty excited for it. Personally, I'm not too bothered about it, but I know that my mate Gingy, who I watch every fight with when it comes out, has quite a deep connection with the fight, and it's the one he was most excited for out of the ones that were confirmed. It's pretty obvious that it's going to be the swords clashing because both are swordsmen, and it doesn't really fit with any of the others. Also, I almost forgot, Cole McGrath versus Alex Mercer, I think it's going to be the Scales, because the Scales didn't really have any other good fights, and it goes off the game's morality systems, I think. I don't know much about the characters, but everyone says it's in the scale, so I'm gonna go with that. Then we have the one I'm actually excited for. Oh boy. So if you're one of the 20 people who watched my video on my dream fights, this was on the list. It was in the top 10 as well. It is one of the fights that I am most excited for ever in Death Battle, because I just love the insane amount of possibilities it has. And it was another one where, as soon as I saw it on the 2D poll, I knew it was going to win. Because just like Coleman versus Alex Mercer, it's got a community around it. Like, I saw the fight, and it was one of the few where I saw people make videos telling people to vote for it. So, as soon as it won, it got me so excited, because even though I don't care too much about them, like, I watched most of Gravity Falls, but it was mainly just because my sister was watching it and I was there at the time, and I've not watched any My Little Pony. But both are incredibly fun characters. Either one winning would be fun. I hope we get a lot of hand-drawn animation. I know the whole fight's not going to be hand-drawn, but I I still think no matter what, it's going to be good. And it's actually a fight which means Bill can get taken seriously because every time someone tries to pit him up in death battle, they just pit him up against a character either he stomps or one that doesn't really bounce off him well. As for the animation styles, I think will fall into. I think we've already gotten confirmation that Ant-Man versus Adam is going to be Sprite. Sorry. Uh, Colm versus Alex Mercer is going to be 3D. Bill versus Discord is going to be Sprite, but I think it's going to have quite a bit of hand drawn in it. And I'm going to go with the idea that The Chosen versus Dragonborn is going to be 3D. Because both are from 3D games, they've never really had any sprite adaptations, so I think it'd make the most sense. And overall, I think all four will be will be good fights. The one which I think has the highest possibility is probably Chosen versus Dragonborn, because it's the one which apparently was incredibly highly requested by the creators, to the point where this fight is apparently the second most wanted fight they've ever done for one of the writers, and the first was Dia versus Alucard, which is my favorite fight of all time. So yeah, I do kind of have high expectations for it, but I think it'll pay off. I think Bill versus Discord is the question mark because it's either going to be that or the randomness one. And if this is not the question mark, then the question mark is going to be a curveball finale, I think. But I think this makes the most sense. The mystery can represent the Mystery Shack or just how random Discord is. Alright, with that, we're going to start going through the cipher, talking about possible matchups, which means I think we're starting with. Oh, right, the shuffle. So with the shuffle, I basically saw everyone go one of two ways. It was either saying it represents. Wait, everyone basically immediately said it's representing cards. And if that's happening, then it's almost certainly Ash versus Yugi, in my opinion. It's a matchup which is incredibly highly requested. It is loved by the community. Ash has just finished this story, meaning they don't need to worry about Ash getting a new Pokemon that wins the fight anymore. And I think it's just a lot they can do with it. Because both have such wide arsenals. Said arsenals for a second. But Ash especially, I think, would be really interesting. I've grown up quite a long way with Ash, and I watched quite a bit of Yu-Gi-Oh, so I quite like it. I'm pretty sure Yugi wins, or more like a Tem wins. But if Ash won, I wouldn't be surprised, considering his Pikachu is basically God. The other way I saw people going with it was that it represented Hisoka. And if it is going to be Hisoka, everyone's saying it's versus a Gambit. I don't know much about Gambit, but I don't really care too much about that fight. If I were to go with a Hisoka match, though, I would much rather prefer Orochimaru. Mainly because the whole joke with both characters is that they get uncomfortably close to a kid. And, like, I know that's not the best theme for a fight, but they just have this aura both to them where they would just clash really well. And I know nothing about the other guy. I keep forgetting his name. Gambit, that's it. I don't know much about Gambit. I don't even know what series he's from. I think he's Marvel. But I'm gonna place the bet that it's Ash versus Yugi. But if it was a Hisoka fight, I wouldn't be too surprised. Alright, next up, we've got the money symbol. And I heard a lot of people immediately go to Scrooge McDuck versus Mr. Krabs for some reason. And I just don't like the idea of that fight. First of all, we got a SpongeBob matchup literally last season, and to do that as well as a returner for Scrooge just for him to get wrecked, it wouldn't feel right. Honestly, I think SpongeBob shouldn't be done again on the show unless they're going to go with SpongeBob versus Gumball. I think if you keep using SpongeBob, it doesn't become funny anymore, you know? It loses some of its charm. So the matchup I'm going to go with here is Catwoman versus Black Cat. Because it can work with the money because both require a lot of riches. It's again a really high requested match. Uh, it's one of the big Marvel versus DC fights left, And let's be honest, they always need to put in at least two Marvel vs. DC matchups, and if it's not this, then there isn't really another. There's a few possibilities for Marvel characters and DC characters, but not one where they face each other. So I think that'll just end up happening. I think that Catwoman wins, but I genuinely don't know. Both are really weird in scaling. And I think it'd be an interesting match. It's the one I'm gonna put my bet on, and I'd honestly be kind of disappointed if it was another SpongeBob matchup. Alright, next up we've got the Lotus or Dreamcatcher symbol. I said it could be either because a lot of people have said it can be either. I do kind of lean more towards the Lotus angle though. And but if it is the Dreamcatcher, I'm going to say it's probably Freddy Krueger versus Pennywise because without it, we don't really have any ideas for a big horror fight this season. Like I want to say Dragon Ball versus Chosen Undead would work, but it really doesn't. Maybe they could do a bonus fight for it, but I just don't really see a good match here. But if we go with the Lotus idea, I've heard a lot of people say Luce versus Anne, and I do quite get why. Like, Owl House and Amphibia have just ended. They're quite similar characters. People both like them. It's quite a requested match. But I'm going to say the more likely one is Liu Kang versus Jago. Mortal Kombat versus Killer Instinct's legacy match. It's one of the big final fighting game fights people are talking about. People have been saying it should have happened for quite a while, and I think it'll be quite interesting. This is another one where it's honestly kind of a win-win for my boy Gingy, because on one hand he loves horror films, mainly Freddy Krueger, and on the other he loves fighting games, especially Mortal Kombat. So unless it says Anne versus Lutz, which I'm pretty sure Anne wins that, unless they go with that, I think it's gonna be a win for him. For the others, I'm pretty sure Freddy beats Pennywise, and I have absolutely no clue for Liu Kang versus Jago, but I'd probably place the bet on Liu Kang. Overall, I think all three could be interesting. I'm gonna lean more to Liu Kang versus Jago, but anyone that happens would be fine. Right, next up we have the Skull and Crossbones, and just looking at it, you can probably tell that I think it's gonna be a pirate fight. A lot of people have said it could be poison based, but I've not really heard any good ideas for a poison fight, so I'm just gonna lean into the pirates. A lot of people have said Jack Sparrow versus Indiana Jones, because, oh, Indiana has a film coming up, but if they were to do Indiana Jones, I would much rather prefer if he fought Lara Croft, and that just would not fit here. So I'm gonna lean far more heavily into the idea that it's One Piece. Mainly because One Piece has barely any fights in comparison to some other big anime, and all three of them kind of sucked. Like, the best one of them, in my opinion, was a 6 out of 10, and that was Zoro versus Urza, and that was in season 3. Since then, we had what I consider, like, two out of 10 fights. Now, I'm just gonna cope and say it might be Mihawk versus Atomic Samurai. You know, try and get up on my One Punch Man love. I don't think it's quite as likely though, because it's a fight where you have to go through a lot of scaling to get the winner. I also thought Blackbeard, but he's not quite done anything yet. If he does show up, he's a lot of people say facing King K. Rool, but I think Shigaraki is a much more thematic fight. Like, for one, we have two giant people known for being fat and like absorbing stuff, I guess. And on the other, we have the next line in the legacy of villains who take inspiration from the main villain of their generation. I, but the one I'm putting my money on is Whitebeard versus Escanor, baby. A fight which, honestly, if I extended my top 16 to a top 20 back in my last video about my dream matchups, Whitebeard versus Escanor probably would have made the list. It is now that I've finished the Marineford arc and I've seen Whitebeard, I genuinely love him, and Escanor is just this force of nature, you know? It's one of those fights where I I don't even care who wins because both are just such lovable characters. But Whitebeard does stomp him into the ground if we go with Prime Whitebeard. I think any of these matchups would be pretty fun. The one I'd prefer the least would be Sparrow versus Indiana, or Whitebeard versus King K. Rool. Not Whitebeard, Blackbeard versus King K. Rool. I'm placing the bet that it's probably going to be Whitebeard versus Escanor, but I can always be wrong here. Just don't do Luffy versus Naruto yet, please. Let Luffy's story finish. Alright, after that we have the Star. Oh, it's a JoJo fight, let's be honest. Honestly, if it's not a JoJo fight, I would be seriously shocked. Considering JoJo has been one of the most popular series Death Battle's been using as of late, with both of their fighting heats being highly regarded as good. Like, one of them was my favorite fight of all time, and the other is a really solid 8 out of 10. And it's probably Joker versus Giorno. Like, the only way that it's not going to be Joker versus Giorno is if I'm right about another prediction a little later, where they wouldn't do it because it'd be the same series facing each other twice. I I personally put myself on a bit of copium and put Jolene versus Dofi on it. They probably won't because it's going to be another One Piece matchup. Best not to do two in one season, you know. But the one I'm personally placing my bets on is going to be Funny Valentine versus Senator Armstrong. Not only does the star work with them because it's a JoJo character, but also both are so America based that you could consider it like the American stripe. So that could work on two layers. Plus, it is one of the most highly requested matchups that has just existed for years. Like, when I first got into the death battle scene and I started seeing people talk about fights they really wanted, one of the first that came up to me was Funny versus Armstrong. And, like, I didn't even know who either character was yet. The most I knew was that Armstrong was the funny nanomachines guy. But now that I've absorbed more of both series, I think not only is it incredibly likely, but they could have also been hinting towards it last season with Raiden versus Excalibur, where we do hear a lot of Boomstick talking up how much he loves Armstrong. So I think that would be really fun. Any one of these I think would probably end up being a sprite match because everyone here has pretty good sprites, even Armstrong surprisingly. I'm gonna say that it's most likely he Funny versus Armstrong. If it's Joker versus Giorno, it's one where I've sort of grown with it with time, where I don't want it, but if it happens, I'll let it exist. And if it was Jolene versus Dofi, I would absolutely pop off. Meanwhile, my friends would probably strangle me. But who cares? I win. Alright, next up we have the recycling symbol. And this one goes one of two ways, in my opinion. Either it's Captain Planet or it's a remake. Now, if it's Captain Planet, which I do kind of think is quite likely, it's going to be against Aang because it's the matchup which Death Battle has stated before they almost did, but then scrapped. And that could also work into the idea that they're recycling it, which is, I know everyone said that already, but I think it's incredibly likely. My only thing is that, like, in the last 3 seasons, we've had 2 Avatar fights, so they might not want to do it. But at the same time, it has been about 4 seasons, which is generally how long they wait between using a character for the first and second time. And Aang is just a character which never loses popularity. If we are going the remake route, though, I don't think it's hard to see which one they're remaking. It's going to be Master Chief versus Doom Guy. It's the fight which everyone talks should be remade, and I definitely agree. Not because I think the original was bad, but because I think now that the 3D animators have gone a lot better, we can move away from the not as good sprites and move to an insane 3D gunfight. Like, you have the guys from Rooster Teeth. Get the guys who worked on Red versus Blue on this. It would be glorious. Like, even if the two don't utter a word, the sheer action would be immeasurable. Plus, just getting to talk about Doom Guy properly would be so much better, especially since Doom 2016 came out since then, so it look a lot better. Though don't bring up Doomslayer, please. Just I want the fight to be even, not just it's a random dude versus a god. So I think either are more are quite likely. I'm I probably put it like a 60-40 split towards her Aang versus Captain Planet because it has more thematic angle, I think. But if it was Doom Guy versus Master Chief, I would be more excited because it's a fight which I definitely want. Like it was last year, it was on my top 16, and it's still in my top 20. So yeah, I think Aang vs Captain Planet would probably be Sprite, but if I had my way, it'd probably be hand drawn. And then Master Chief versus Doom Guy, 100% 3D. All right, next up we have the twin colors, where the only thing I could think of for them was agreeing with Nemesis Bloodreich that it could very well be the moon systems, which is why I wanted to say Sailor Moon versus Pegasus Seiya. It is pretty much the only thing I could think of. The only other thing I'd heard people say was that it's not just black and white and it's instead color, so it could be representing Gojo. But I just hope it's not Gojo because then if it is, then it's gonna be Makima, and I don't want to talk about Gojo versus Makima yet. I want to make it. Let me make my video as why it's a terrible fight, and just give a better alternative, please. uh, Pegasus Seiya versus Sailor Moon, though, I think it could be quite an interesting fight. I'm pretty sure Sailor Moon wins, and like, I would genuinely be kind of excited for it because of how much I've heard about Sailor Moon and how much people seem to love it. And I think it would just be really fun, you know? It's the we could get the classic 80s cheese from it. And like it feels similar to me to something like Skeletor versus Mumra, where it would just be incredibly cheesy and fun. And yeah, I quite like this fight. I I think Sailor Moon wins. It'd probably be Sprite, but it could be hand drawn. Good fight. It's the one I'm placing my bet for. Moving on. We were gonna do the yin yang symbol, but I genuinely think this is the one hinting towards the finale, which we're gonna get to later at the end of the slideshow, so we'll just keep moving on. Right, the suit. Now, a lot of people have tried saying this could be Spy versus Agent 47. I really want to agree with you, okay? You have no idea how much I want to agree with you. It is one of my favorite matchups of all time. I love Spy. I've not seen much from Agent 47, but I want to play Hitman. I think it's one of those ridiculously good fights where you can just do so much. But the one I'm going to lean into more is Yoshikage Kira versus whoever this guy is. I know he's a Persona character, but his name's just left my mind. I've not played Persona. Actually, this fight I think could be alright. The one downside to it for me is that it means we're not gonna get Kira versus the Chad Bomber. But hey, we still have Roy Mustang for that. The other thing is, if this is the fight being made, then they're not going to do Joker versus Giorno. Because they're not going to do two JoJo versus Persona fights. I've heard it's quite thematic. Both are cool, calm, collected people who can summon giant ghost things that can cause explosions. I think it's quite interesting. I think both could be quite strategic. There could be a lot you could do with it. I'm interested to see how they try and work in Bites the Dust. I think that Kira wins, but that's just because I don't know the other guy and I want Kira to win. And like, Sheer Heart Attack has no weaknesses, guys. Come on. All right, next up we have the Pentagram, and I am genuinely so excited for the Pentagram because it only really has two matchups and both pop. Hellboy versus Nero and Ghost Rider versus Spawn. Both of these fights are glorious. First, Hellboy versus Nero would just bring my friend group together to the point where we could be seeing a watch party larger than any other for me. Normally it's me and Gingy watching it. Sometimes Quaxie will show up, but this one, a bunch of my friends are big Devil May Cry fans, so that would bring them in. And then on the other hand, we have quite a few Hellboy fans in my friend group, so I'd bring them in. I'm pretty sure Nero wins, but at the same time, I've been told that by a Devil May Cry fan who also tried to argue that Dante could beat Arceus. So, I don't know. The other one is Ghost Rider vs. Spawn, though, which is the one I'm going to lean more heavily into it being, mainly because of just how many people have said this should be a fight, to the point where it has been considered by some to be a finale-worthy fight. Uh, I actually do think it's the one which I would put in consideration for a finale, because it does fit with a few lines of the poem, which we'll talk about later. But I am gonna lean into it being a different fight because I think that fits quite a bit better. But everyone has wanted this fight pretty much ever since Ghost Rider vs. Lobo came out and people saw how fun Zarathos was. And this fight, we could see a lot more of Zarathos and a lot more of him fighting on equal footing. I don't know much about Spawn, but it's another one where I think it was hinted towards last season with Trunks versus his Silver. And we just saw where they saw a lot of references to Spawn. And people have just wanted the fight forever. I think both would be 3D probably, but we've also seen a lot of other fights that could be 3D here. I think I do think Ghost Rider vs. Spawn could work in 2D, but with both being this big, there's no way they wouldn't take the opportunity to make it 3D. Yeah, I either fight I would absolutely pop off for. Both would really excite me, and I might even do enough research to make a video on who wins for them. Though I don't really want to make a video on Ghost Rider vs. Spawn because of how close it sounds, and how I just have no clue who takes the win. Right, next up we have the spiked flask, which I very nearly forgot about somehow, even though the most likely option is Bowser versus Eggman, a fight which I have been talking about for ages. Like, if you don't remember back in the early parts of season 9 where I was actually uploading, I was saying after pretty much every one of my prediction videos, I said we could be getting Bowser versus Eggman because it just fits so well into that slot where we had just gotten confirmation about the Mario film and Sonic 2 had just come out. But now, with the Mario film having just come out and Sonic 3 having been confirmed, we still have that time zone to do it. The other fight everyone says it could be is Jimmy Neutron versus his Dexter from Dexter's Lab. I don't like the fight, I'm sorry. Like, they're just smart kids, and you want to see one of them get killed. Fun. The reason I do lean more on it being Bowser vs. Eggman is because of the spiked ring around the flask, which I think is trying to hint towards both. I don't know, maybe they could throw us a curveball. Maybe it's the guy from Dr. Stone or something. I think there's not many ways you could go wrong with this fight, but just give us Bowser vs. Eggman. Let me make the video breaking it down, please. Then we have the water symbol, which either one is a fight which I could want. Alright, so first of all, I just want to point out Katara is quite likely. I think people wanted to face one of the people from Fairy Tail. I just put Nia there because I actually knew the character. It's probably not going to happen, but who knows. The big one, which is the one that I'm going to put my bet down for, is Chaos versus Kyogre. Because apparently it's a fight which Death Battle want to do. It's quite a passionate one, which seems to be the theme of the season. And it's quite an interesting one, you know? Like, I've said this to my friends before, but I would be really curious to see how they take Kyogre, a creature with no limbs, and expect it to throw hands, you know? Also, I'm considering writing a book on Pokemon scaling, so I would gladly do a bit of Sonic research to figure out who wins this fight. It's probably Kyogre, considering some of the things that have happened with Kyogre in the games. But I wouldn't be surprised if Chaos took the win. And it'll probably be Sprite, but it could be 3D. But the one that I'm going to put myself on Copium and say it could happen is Percy Jackson versus Aqualad. Because Percy Jackson is one of my favorite characters of all time. The Percy Jackson series is my favorite book series of all time. And I would gladly talk about it for a video. Talk about how great Percy is, some of his skill set, how he absolutely decimates Aqualad. And with it being a water theme and Percy Jackson's live action series having just been confirmed, I think it could be really good for right now. I think it has a lot of possibilities. It's really good characters, and it's one of the ones where I would want it the most. Unfortunately, it's more likely going to be Chaos versus Kyogre, but I'd prefer Percy versus Aqualad. Alright, now let's talk about the finals, okay? You ready to see what I think will be the finals of this season? You might not be able to hear that, I was trying to do a drum roll. Darth Vader versus Obito. First of all, yes, I think it's the Yin Yang, because both are sort of opposites, both are good guys turned bad, the good and the dark. But I also think it's going to be the finale because of the poem. Basically, if you take a look at the wheel, you saw that there was random gibberish, and people very quickly found out that it was translating to this poem. Basically, normal teasers are a bore. For all the fights and deaths in store, use the keys to match the lines. You'll never know what clues you'll find. X people out, but keep it silent. Kill them all and treat them violent. Beast without, but not within. The end will come from what begins. A dark reflection of the past. Season 10 is coming fast. Let's break down each one of the main lines to talk about why I think it fits with Vader versus Obito. First of all, X people out, but keep it silent. Both are known for killing a ridiculous amount of people, but also neither have. Both wear masks without face holes. Without mouth holes. So whilst they can speak, they mostly remain silent. Kill them all and treat them violent. Both try to kill people, and both do it in an act of revenge violently, you know? Especially the Order 66 scene, like, Jesus Christ. Beast without, but not within. I think this one especially links to Vader, because without, he's one of the. Outside, he's one of the scariest creatures in his universe, but inside, he's just this withered husk on the verge of death, you know? The end will come from what begins. Normally, was Vader a very early fight, but also you can look at the spiral mask of Obito and say, technically, both the beginning and end are the same, you know? Then the dark reflection of the past. Well, that one, both were originally good guys, but have over time become dark. So a dark reflection. And both are incredibly similar, you know? Plus, you could say the reflection links to the whole idea of you looking into Obito's eyes for his powers. I don't personally like. I don't love either character, okay? I've never finished a Star Wars film, and I consider Naruto mid as hell. But these two specific characters are so interesting to me, and I just think there's so much they could do with them, where I genuinely love it. And like we already know that a Naruto versus Star Wars fight in a 3D SFM style would do really well, considering the last time they did that, it was considered the best fight of season 7. I think it is the most likely fight. It has a lot you can do with it. I would genuinely do a bit of research into both to see who wins. And I think it could be a perfect finale, you know? It But that wraps up my predictions. And overall, if I'm right about even some of these fights, it is going to be one of the best seasons of Death Battle we've ever had. Like, there is flat out no terrible matchups from what I've seen. With some where I see the matchups, I just don't like them right off the bat, like Homelander vs. Omni-Man. But with this, there wasn't really one which I genuinely hated from the hints. The closest we got to that is possibly seeing Gojo versus Makima, which I just don't think they do, considering how little of Chainsaw Man's been animated and how much they don't want to spoil it for anime watchers. But other than that, there's a few fights there which were in my top 16 for this year. There's quite a few fights which could have been in that video. There's quite a few which I think have the possibility to be really fun. And there's quite a few which I'd gladly make videos on. So Death Battle, just give us some good fights this season. I am gonna try and get the season 9 ranking up soon. I've been trying to put a lot of effort into it. I've been trying to script out the video. I'm very close though. I'm currently scripting number 6. So we're very, very close. Thanks for watching though. If you made it this far, like the video. If you're not already, then subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.